What happens when a television icon walks into the lion's den and refuses to back down from the pack? In just 39 seconds, one comment would turn a casual interview into the most explosive showdown daytime television had ever witnessed. What should have been light entertainment became a battle of wills that nobody saw coming. This is the story of the day Jeremy Clarkson was kicked off Loose Women. The studio lights were hot. The audience was packed in tight. Jeremy Clarkson sat in the guest chair, surrounded by the Loose Women panel. Denise Welch, Janet Street Porter, Carol McGiffin, and Andrea McLean formed a semicircle around him. The atmosphere should have been friendly. It was anything but. You could feel the tension from the moment Jeremy walked onto the set. The way Denise looked at him. The way the others exchanged glances. This was not going to be a normal interview. This was going to be something else entirely. The cameras were rolling. The red lights glowed. The audience settled into their seats. They had no idea what they were about to witness. They thought they were coming to see a friendly chat about cars and television. They were wrong. Denise Welch was leading the conversation. She had that look in her eye. The kind of look that said she was ready for confrontation. Jeremy could sense it. He had been doing interviews for decades. He knew when someone was about to come at him. He shifted slightly in his seat, made himself comfortable. If this was going to be a fight, he was not going to look rattled. He was not going to give them the satisfaction of seeing him squirm. The panel members leaned forward in their chairs, like predators circling prey, waiting for the right moment to strike. Jeremy noticed this. He always noticed these things. Body language never lied. The interview started innocently enough. Small talk about cars. A few jokes about his latest project. The audience laughed in all the right places, but Denise was just warming up. She leaned forward in her chair. "So Jeremy," Denise began, her voice dripping with manufactured sweetness. "Let's talk about some of your more controversial opinions." Jeremy shifted in his seat. "Well, that's a broad topic, Denise. Which particular opinion would you like to misrepresent today?" The audience went quiet. That was the first jab. Direct. Unfiltered. Classic Clarkson. Denise's smile tightened. She was not used to guests who fought back. Again, you could see the calculation in her eyes. Should she laugh it off? Should she come back harder? She chose the latter. Always a mistake when dealing with someone like Jeremy. The audience members glanced at each other. This was not what they expected. This was not the usual polite banter. This was something sharper, something more real. "I'm not misrepresenting anything," Denise shot back. "I'm simply asking you to explain some of the things you've said. You do remember saying them, don't you?" "Of course I remember," Jeremy replied calmly. "But what I actually said, and what you lot decide I said, are often two very different things." Carol McGiffin jumped in. "Well, maybe if you were clearer in your communication, there wouldn't be so much confusion." The panel was ganging up now. Classic move. When one attack doesn't work, bring in reinforcements. Jeremy had seen this before. He remained calm. Jeremy turned to look at Carol. "I'm perfectly clear. The problem is that some people would rather be offended than actually listen to what's being said." A few people in the audience murmured in agreement. Others looked shocked. The divide was already forming. Team Jeremy versus Team Panel. This was becoming a battleground. Janet Street Porter was next. She pointed a finger at Jeremy. "That's incredibly arrogant. You're basically saying everyone else is wrong, and you're right." "No," Jeremy said firmly. "I'm saying that context matters. I'm saying that nuance exists. And I'm saying that I refuse to apologize for having an opinion." Denise leaned back, crossing her arms. "So you don't think you should ever apologize for anything you say?" "I didn't say that," Jeremy responded. "I said I won't apologize for having opinions. If I genuinely hurt someone, that's different. But I won't apologize for disagreeing with the mob." The audience was split. Some were nodding along. Others were shifting uncomfortably. The panel could feel they were losing control. Denise decided to go for the kill. "Let's talk about women then," Denise said, her voice sharp. "You've made some pretty awful comments about women over the years. Do you stand by those?" Here it was, the ambush question, the one they had been building toward. Jeremy could see it coming a mile away. They thought this would corner him, force him to either defend something indefensible or back down and apologize. Jeremy sighed. "Borrower such as?" It was a simple question. 2 words, but it carried weight. It meant he was not going to accept vague accusations. He wanted specifics. He wanted them to actually quote him instead of paraphrasing him into something he never said. "Oh, come on," Carol interjected. "Don't play dumb. You know exactly what you've said." "Actually, I don't," Jeremy said, "because I suspect what you think I said and what I actually said are miles apart. So please, enlighten me. Quote me directly." Denise fumbled. She clearly expected him to just accept the accusation. "Well, there was that time you said women can't drive properly." "I never said that," Jeremy replied flatly. "I made a joke about parking. A joke. On a comedy program. About driving. Which is what the entire show was about. Cars. Driving. Jokes about driving. But are we really doing this?" The frustration in his voice was real. Not anger. Just genuine bewilderment that this was the level of discussion they were having. That a joke from years ago on a comedy show was being treated like a serious statement of belief. Carol leaned forward. "But don't you see how jokes like that reinforce harmful stereotypes? Don't you understand the impact your words have?" "Impact?" Jeremy laughed. "It was a parking joke on a car show. If someone's entire view of women is shaped by a parking joke on Top Gear, then they have much bigger problems than anything I could possibly say." Janet jumped back in. "Jokes can be harmful, Jeremy. They perpetuate stereotypes." "Everything perpetuates something," Jeremy said. "Every word out of anyone's mouth could offend someone somewhere. Should we all just stop talking?" "Don't be ridiculous," Denise snapped. "We're talking about you being responsible for what you say. Something you clearly struggle with." That was it. That was the line. Jeremy's expression changed. The playful defensiveness evaporated. Now he was genuinely annoyed. The temperature in the studio dropped. You could feel it. The shift from heated debate to something darker, something more personal. The gloves were coming off. "Responsible?" Jeremy said slowly. "You want to lecture me about being responsible? You, who built a career on saying whatever pops into your head? You, who thrive on controversy? That's rich." The audience gasped. Some covered their mouths. Others leaned forward in their seats. This was getting intense. This was getting real. This was not scripted television anymore. Denise's face flushed red. "Excuse me? How dare you?" "How dare I?" Jeremy laughed. "How dare you invite me here just to ambush me? You didn't want a conversation. You wanted a public execution. You wanted me to sit here and take it while you all pile on." Andrea McLean, who had been silent until now, tried to calm things down. "Jeremy, I think we're all just trying to have an honest discussion here." "An honest discussion?" Jeremy turned to Andrea. "There's nothing honest about this. This is a setup. You all decided what you thought before I even sat down." Denise stood up. Actually stood up. The studio went silent. "If you don't like the questions, you can leave," she said coldly. The power move. The intimidation tactic. Stand over the guest. Make them feel small. Make them feel unwelcome. It might have worked on someone else, but not Jeremy Clarkson. He stayed in his chair, did not move, did not flinch, just looked up at her with an expression that said he was not impressed, not intimidated, not backing down. Jeremy stared at her. Is that a threat? His voice was steady, calm, but there was steel underneath. He was drawing a line, asking her if she really wanted to go down this road. giving her a chance to back off before this got uglier. "It's a suggestion," Denise replied. "Maybe you'd be more comfortable somewhere that doesn't challenge you." The audience gasped. Some people in the front row had their hands over their mouths. This was live television. This was really happening. Jeremy stayed seated. "Challenge me? You haven't challenged anything. You've just thrown accusations and expected me to grovel. And that's not a challenge. That's bullying." The word hung in the air. Bullying. He had just accused them of bullying him, on their own show, in front of their own audience. The audacity was breathtaking. And the worst part? He was right. Anyone watching could see it. 4 people against 1. Twisting words. Refusing explanations. It looked exactly like what he said it was. "Bullying?" Carol laughed. "You're calling us bullies? That's incredible." "What would you call it?" Jeremy asked. 4 against 1. Twisting my words. Refusing to accept my explanations. Telling me to leave when I defend myself. Yeah, I'd call that bullying. Denise crossed her arms. Her face was a mask of fury. "You know what, Jeremy? I think we're done here. I think you should leave." The words hung in the air. The cameras kept rolling. The producers in the booth were frozen. Nobody knew what to do. This had never happened before. The floor manager looked at the director. The director looked at the executive producer. Everyone was waiting for someone to make a decision. To cut to commercial. To intervene. But nobody moved. They were all paralyzed by the spectacle unfolding in front of them. Because this was television gold. Controversial. Dramatic. Real. The kind of moment that would be replayed for years. The kind of moment that would define careers. "You're kicking me off?" Jeremy asked, his voice calm but cold. "Yes," Denise said firmly. "I'm asking you to leave the show." Janet nodded. "I agree. This isn't productive." Carol added her voice. "Yeah, maybe it's best if you go." Andrea looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. She just stared at the desk. Jeremy stood up slowly. He looked at each of them in turn. The silence was deafening. First Denise, then Janet, then Carol, then Andrea. Taking his time, making eye contact, letting them see that he was not ashamed, not embarrassed, not defeated, just disappointed in them. The audience held its collective breath. This was the moment. Was he going to storm off? Was he going to shout? Was he going to make a scene? "This is unbelievable," he said quietly. "You invite someone on your show. You attack them. And when they don't roll over and play dead, you throw them out. And you wonder why people don't trust the media." His voice was quiet, but it carried. Every person in that studio heard him. Every camera captured his words. Every viewer at home leaned closer to their screens. "Just go, Jeremy," Denise said, her voice icy. "Oh, I'm going," Jeremy replied. "But not because you're telling me to. I'm leaving because I have better things to do than sit here and be insulted by a panel of hypocrites who can dish it out but can't take it." Denise's jaw dropped. "How dare you call us hypocrites?" She was shaking now, actually shaking with rage. Her carefully constructed image of control was crumbling. She had lost her composure completely, and everyone could see it. "How dare I?" Jeremy turned back to face her fully. "You spend your entire show giving your opinions on everything under the sun. You criticize everyone. You tear people apart. But the second someone disagrees with you, you can't handle it. That's the definition of hypocrisy." Carol McGiffin's face was red. Janet Street Porter was pointing her finger like a weapon. Andrea McLean looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. The panel was in disarray. Janet stood up now, too. "You need to leave. Now." "I'm leaving," Jeremy said. "But before I go, let me say this. You don't want equality. You don't want discussion. You want conformity. You want everyone to think exactly like you do. And when they don't, you silence them. That's not progress. That's tyranny." The word echoed through the studio. Tyranny. Strong word. Powerful word. Accurate word. Because that is exactly what it looked like. A group of people with power trying to silence someone who dared to disagree. The audience was in shock. Some people were clapping. Others were booing. The studio was chaos. The sound was overwhelming. Voices raised in support. Voices raised in anger. The neat divisions of the studio audience had broken down into something messier, something more honest, something more human. Denise's face was purple with rage. "Get out! Get off my show!" "Your show?" Jeremy laughed. "It's not your show, Denise. It's a panel. You're just one voice. But you've decided you're the queen, haven't you? You've decided that everyone has to bow to you." Carol stood up and pointed to the exit. "Just go, Jeremy. You've said enough." "Have I?" Jeremy asked. "Or have I just said things you don't want to hear? There's a difference." He started walking toward the exit. The cameras followed him. Every step was captured, every moment preserved forever. The camera operators moved with him, tracking his every movement. This was the money shot. This was the clip that would go viral. This was the moment that would be shown on news programs for days. His footsteps echoed. The microphone clipped to his jacket, picked up his breathing. Steady, controlled, not panicked, not rushed. Just a man walking away from people who were not worth his time. Denise called after him, "Don't come back!" Jeremy stopped at the edge of the set. He turned one last time. "I wouldn't dream of it." This show is a perfect example of everything that's wrong with modern broadcasting. You pretend to want diverse opinions, but you only want opinions that match yours. You claim to be open-minded, but you're the most closed-minded people I've ever met. The final blow, the closing statement, the last word. He was leaving them with that, with the truth, with the mirror held up to their faces, showing them exactly what they had become. Denise tried to respond. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. What could she say? How could she defend against accusations that everyone watching had just seen proven true? Janet was shaking with anger. "Just go." "I'm gone," Jeremy said, and he walked off the set. The second he was out of sight, the studio erupted. The audience was divided. Half were standing and applauding. The other half were sitting in stunned silence. The panel looked at each other, clearly unsure of what to do next. Denise tried to regain control. "Well, that was certainly something," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Unbelievable," Carol added. "Absolutely unbelievable." Janet shook her head. "I've never seen anything like that. The arrogance, the nerve." Andrea finally spoke. "Maybe we were a bit harsh." The other three turned to stare at her. The looks they gave her could have frozen water. How dare she break ranks? How dare she question the narrative they were trying to build? How dare she suggest they might have been wrong? "Harsh," Denise repeated. "We were holding him accountable." "Were we, though?" Andrea asked quietly. "Or were we just attacking him because we disagree with him?" The question hung there. Uncomfortable. Honest. True. Andrea had said what everyone in the audience was thinking, what everyone watching at home was thinking. She had broken the spell. "Don't you dare defend him," Carol snapped. "He insulted us. He called us hypocrites." "But was he wrong?" Andrea pressed. "We do give our opinions all the time. And we do get upset when people disagree." Denise cut her off. "This is not the time, Andrea. We need to move on." But the damage was done. The audience knew what they had just witnessed. The cameras had captured everything. There was no spinning this, no reframing it. Jeremy Clarkson had walked into their territory, refused to back down, and walked out on his own terms. Backstage, Jeremy was removing his microphone. A producer approached him nervously. The backstage area was quiet. Staff members pretended to be busy, but everyone was listening. Everyone wanted to hear what Jeremy would say now that he was off camera. "Jeremy, that was, quite something," the producer stammered. "Yeah," Jeremy said calmly. "It was." His hands were steady as he unclipped the small black box from his belt. No shaking, no nervousness. Just calm, methodical movements, like a man who had nothing to be ashamed of. "Do you regret any of it?" the producer asked. Jeremy thought for a moment. "Not even slightly. They wanted to put me in a corner. They wanted me to apologize for existing. I wasn't going to do that. I'm not going to do that. Ever." The producer nodded slowly. You could tell he agreed. You could tell he had seen what everyone else had seen, that this was not an interview. It was an ambush. "They're going to talk about this for days," the producer said. "Let them," Jeremy replied. "The people watching will make up their own minds. They saw what happened. They heard what was said. They'll decide who was reasonable and who wasn't." He handed the microphone to the producer and walked toward the exit. Back on the set, Denise was trying to salvage the show, but her hands were shaking. Her voice was unsteady. She knew how this looked. She knew that kicking a guest off had made her look petty, made her look small, made her look exactly like the entitled host Jeremy had accused her of being. She shuffled the papers in front of her, tried to find her notes for the next segment, but her mind was racing, replaying the confrontation, wondering how it would be perceived, knowing deep down that she had made a terrible mistake. "Let's go to commercial," she said finally, giving up on trying to continue. The cameras cut away. The lights dimmed slightly. The panel sat in silence. They had won the battle. They had forced Jeremy out, but they had lost the war, because everyone watching had seen them gang up on one man. Everyone had seen them refuse to listen. Everyone had seen them kick him off when he wouldn't submit. Janet broke the silence first. "Well, that was certainly memorable." Her voice tried for lightness, but failed. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on all of them. And in that moment, Jeremy Clarkson became the underdog, the man who stood up to the mob, the man who refused to be silenced, the man who walked off that set with his dignity intact, while the panel that kicked him off looked like everything he had accused them of being. The heated exchange that was supposed to expose Jeremy Clarkson had done the exact opposite. It had exposed the panel. It had shown their intolerance for dissent, their inability to handle disagreement, their entitled belief that they could control the narrative by simply removing anyone who challenged them. In 39 seconds, Denise Welch had gone from host to antagonist, from interviewer to aggressor, from professional broadcaster to someone who couldn't handle being called out. The studio audience filed out, buzzing with conversation. Some defended the panel, but most were talking about how impressive it was that Jeremy had stood his ground, how he had refused to be intimidated, how he had walked out on his own terms rather than letting them push him around. People pulled out their phones as they walked to their cars, recording their thoughts, sharing their opinions. The internet was about to explode with reactions, and most of them would not be kind to the panel. This was the moment when everything changed, when the hunter became the hunted, when the interrogators became the exposed, when the panel that thought they had all the power realized they had just made a massive mistake. They had underestimated him, thought he would be easy to corner, easy to break, easy to make an example of. They were wrong on all counts. Jeremy Clarkson was many things, but easy was not one of them. Because Jeremy Clarkson had done something they didn't expect. He had fought back. He had called them out. He had refused to play their game. And in doing so, he had won. The clash on Loose Women became legendary. Not because of what Denise Welch said, not because of how the panel attacked, but because of how one man refused to be broken, refused to apologize for existing, refused to let a hostile panel dictate the terms of the conversation. Jeremy Clarkson walked into that studio as a guest. He walked out as a symbol of resistance, a symbol of independence, a symbol of what happens when you refuse to bow to the mob. And Denise Welch, who had started the interview with confidence, ended it looking exactly like what Jeremy had called her: entitled, hypocritical, unable to handle dissent. She had wanted to expose him. Instead, she had exposed herself. The day Jeremy Clarkson was kicked off Loose Women became the day the panel showed their true colors. The day they proved they couldn't handle a guest who fought back. The day they demonstrated that all their talk about open discussion was just talk. When the cameras stopped rolling, when the audience left, when the lights went down, one truth remained. Jeremy Clarkson had walked into that studio alone, outnumbered 4-1, surrounded by hostile hosts, and he had walked out the winner. And not because he shouted the loudest, not because he was the rudest, but because he refused to be broken. He refused to submit. He refused to let them control the narrative. And in the end, that made all the difference.